Very dear students and audience worldwide. This is Professor Dr. Ahmed once again in order to explain some of the terms of post-colonial literature, because one of my classes is going to start with post-colonial literature studies. Perhaps they need it very badly how to understand the meaning of these terms. So that is why a very short video is being recorded in order to make my students learn in a better way so that pre-hand they understand what's the meaning of these terms. So let's have a start with that. First of all, let me introduce to you what are these terms. These are post-colonial terms, the key terms in post-colonial theory. In fact, these are the terms which will get us introduced to the post-colonial literature and its deeper meanings, underlayer meanings, and the meanings which are necessary to be understood by the students. Actually, these are somewhat confusing terms, so that is why I decided that we should have some good knowledge of these terminologies as well. For example, first of all, if we proceed further, we will be able to understand some of the terms we'll be able to see. Say, for example, we are visualizing here colonial and post-colonial, two terms, first of all. So colonial must be read, first of all, the imperialist expansion of Europe into the rest of the world during the last 400 years, in which a dominant imperium or center carried on a relationship of control and influence over its margins or colonies. So colonialism and imperialism seem to be very much related to each other. And because of this, there has been certain activity in the last 400 years. That activity influenced the people which were colonized by the colonizer, and the relationship, if it is discussed in that way, and how these colonized people were pushed to the margins in the colonies, that all can be included in the colonialism. And then you come to the post-colonialism. It says broadly a study of the effects of colonialism. So from here the definition becomes clearer that in fact post-colonialism is after colonialism, though colonialism is going on even today in different forms and shapes, but still, first when colonialism happened at that time, whatever was done in the name of say emancipation, in the name of say solution, salvation, or in the name of getting the people out of the misery, whatever the motto was, that effect of marginalization, that effect of colonizing the people, that effect of other things of entry and exit and intervention into the culture of the people and resistance from the side of the people, if all these things are discussed together, that should be called as the post-colonialism. So these are two basic terms to be understood, colonialism and post-colonialism. Let us see further what we can have into these terms. The next ones are ambivalence, alterity, colonial education. First of all, let's talk about ambivalence, all right? So ambivalence is what? Let's have a reading of ambivalence. The ambiguous way in which colonizer and colonized regard one another. The colonizer often regards the colonized as both inferior yet exotically other, while the colonized regards the colonizer as both enviable yet corrupt. In a context of hybridity, this often produces a mixed sense of blessing and curse. So ambivalence is a type of understanding which continues to waver from one point to the other, that both the parties understand each other to have some hidden motives or to have some ulterior designs in order to influence the other person. So colonizer also thinks in the same way, and the colonized also thinks in the same way. At that time, in this context, hybridity occurs. For example, a colonizer would try to behave like a colonized, and in the same way, a colonized would like to behave in the way as the colonizer would behave. So at that time, hybridity would occur. But this hybridity is not stable. It continues to waver on the side of the colonizer and then on the side of colonized, and that is why what happens is the ambivalence. Now let's see, what is that alterity, the state of being other or different, the political, cultural, linguistic, or religious other, the study of the ways in which one group makes themselves different from the other. So that's an attempt to make feel the people that they are the others. And for this purpose, the political means or cultural means or linguistic means or religious means can be established, can be used by the colonizer in order to show the other people, make the people realize that they are not the party of the colonizer, but rather they are different people who can never be the colonizer, who can never be included into the area which is called as us, us. And therefore, they are definitely the others. By doing so and labeling the people in that way, that will be called as the alterity. Then it comes the colonial education, the process by which a colonizer power assimilates either a subaltern, native elite, or larger population, its way of thinking and seeing the world. Now, that is the change. This is the type of intervention which the colonizer would make in the society and culture of the colonized by educating them in a specific way, that they are educated in such a way that they become subalterns. I mean, they don't speak, they don't have the voice, and instead they begin to become the voice of the colonizer and think in that way, look at the world in that way. So that is a way of influencing and intervention into the culture of the colonized, and that should be called as the colonial education as well. So these three very important terminologies, one is ambivalence and alterity, and after that colonial education. These things have been at work during the colonial eras in different parts of the world. So in that way, they are very important to understand the literature of the people who are post-colonial writers. And then comes diaspora, exoticism, and hegemony. Well, let us see what these things are. First of all, take the diaspora term. Diaspora, the voluntary and enforced migration of peoples from their native homelands. Diaspora literature is often concerned with questions of maintaining or altering identity, language, and culture while in another culture or country. So, diaspora, therefore, is an important term which describes the situation of the people who have migrated from their homelands because of any situations, maybe war, maybe colonization, maybe hunger, whatever the case was. These people, when they migrate and go into another country and into another culture, their language, their identity, their culture gets influenced by them, and a type of alternation or takes place into the very belongings of these people, thinking of these people, and so they have to struggle in order to maintain their own culture and identity, etc. So when they make a struggle, and then they have to adjust in the culture of the the kind of culture which is inhabiting them, at that time they are called as the diaspora people, though the term goes to refer historically to the Jewish diaspora. But here our purpose is not to explain that. Our purpose is to explain the people who are from the post-colonial countries and they have migrated into the centers or metropolis countries, and they suffer from these kind of tensions and conflicts as well. Exoticism is the next term, the process by which a culture practice is made stimulating and exciting in its difference from the colonizer's normal perspective. Yeah, ironically, as European groups educated local indigenous cultures, school children often began to see their native life ways, plants and animals as exotic, and the European counterparts as normal. This is the term which is used to describe the things which the colonized people have. Though the colonized people are others, weak and not so good as the European people think about themselves, but the culture and the possessions which the colonized people had, they were fascinating for the Europe. So that is why they termed it as exotic. And so, in comparison to that, their own things, the plants or the fruits or the other things that was taken as normal or typical, and the other person or the colonized person, whatever belonged to him, was given the title of exoticism. And that is ironic because, on the one hand, the colonizer is declaring that the other is having all bad qualities, not good one. And on the other hand, his culture, his things, his plants, his land, his area is being called as the exotic as well. Then comes hegemony, the power of ruling class to convince. The word convince should be in the minds of the students, because this is the very word that convinces the other or the colonized person that his own culture, his own land, his own being, his identity is not good. Rather, it's a cause of making him small, inferior before the other people, and naturally he begins to think that the culture of the colonizer or the political situation of the colonizer, economy system, whatever these people have, that is superior, that is workable, that is adjustable, that gives the progress, and that is why automatic kind of liking or preference for the colonizer's culture, when it comes, it's called as hegemony. Right. So these are some of the terms that we need necessary to understand political, or we can say post-colonial literature. Then comes to more important terms which are frequently discussed by the people are the students of post-colonial literature. One is hybridity, other is identity. Hybridity, it's a type of trans-cultural forms arise from the cross-cultural exchange. Hybridity can be social, political, linguistic, religious. It is not necessary peaceful mixture, for it can be contentious and disruptive as well as its experience, nerve, the two related definitions. So in that way, hybridity is the uh, product of the two cultures, that is cross-culturalization. When two cultures collide together, in terms of David Waterman, the cultures collide together and then they, some parts of one culture are exchanged by the other, and as a result, the third culture emerges that is called as the hybridity. Hybrid culture comes out, the situation is called as hybridity. Then is identity, the way in which an individual and or a group defines itself. Identity is important to self-concept, social mores, and national understanding. So that's the way how we look at ourselves, how we look at the people, how I understand about myself. That means to which area I belong to, which family I belong to, what's the race and color, and after that, what kind of culture I belong to, and as a result, what's my name and how I'm known religiously, politically, etc., etc. If these things are in my mind, some of the markers are there. These may be called identity marker, and this situation of myself will be called as the identity. Okay, so in that way, some of the terms are there. Language is the next one. In the context of colonialism and post-colonialism, language has often become a site for both colonization and resistance. In particular, a return to regional indigenous language is often advocated since the language was suppressed by colonized forces. The use of European language is a much debated issue among post-colonial authors. So, students, you see, we people have been using this English language for a very long time. Why are we using? Because English language reached us through imperialism and colonialism, and then local languages were cut off. They were not given that much chance as the English was given, and even today we are using this English language. So, language, which is the language of the colonizer, has a very big debating point whether it should be followed, it should not be followed, and all our discourses become post-colonial as soon as we begin using English language, because it is not our language, the language of the colonial master, and we are following all that. So therefore, it becomes contentious. Also, it reminds us of the colonization, and using it in our own way, in a way that we can make a little bit changes to have a good understanding of the language. That should be called as abrogation or negation, and this term should also be defined as the resistance on the part of the person who is colonized. So in that way, language has got its own type of role. Then comes metanarrative and orientalism. You see, what is metanarrative? Grand narrative, a large cultural story that seeks to explain within its borders all the little local narratives. The metanarrative claims to be a big truth concerning the world and the way it works. Some charge that all metanarratives are inherently oppressive because they decide whether other narratives are allowed or not. So basically, metanarrative is the narrative about the narratives. I mean, there are many narratives, smaller, bigger, larger, and it could be political narrative or religious. And then if somebody writes another narrative or the story which is describing all these about these things, so meta-narrative is the thing about the narratives. I mean, it's a story about the stories, and therefore it should be called as the meta-narrative. Same is the case with Orientalism, the process by which the Orient was constructed. The Orientalism or Orient is the construction of the West, because they have said that some such person is called Orient, and opposite to that is called Occident. So that is the way how Europe would like to look at us people. And keeping this in point, the author Edward Said wrote one book, Orientalism, where he tried to challenge the norms established by the Western people about the Eastern people and constructing the Orient. So this concept, reading of this concept, and debating about this concept is called as the Orientalism. So these are some of the terminologies. Then comes the other and the race. As we have already said that in colonizing countries and colonized countries, two groups are automatically formed. One is us, other is the other. So other is somebody who has been othered, who has been put aside, who has been marginalized, who has been ignored, who has been silenced. So in that way, the term other is used. That person is socially, politically, psychologically silenced. Okay, and then is the race, is the classification of human beings on biological characteristics that they belong to this race or that race. Possibly, it is also the part of the post-colonial studies, because the white man would definitely claim the higher race, and then he would assign the lower inferior race to That is something debatable. It's not necessary that it has happened, but still, post-colonial studies do include this type of thing in their studies and debates as well. So, in that way, thank you very much for watching. This was all about the thing that we wanted to discuss regarding post-colonial literature and the terminology. I hope after having a type of understanding, not 100% understanding, you people might have gained some knowledge. I would advise the students of postcolonial literature to go online and get a little bit more explanation and try to assign the kind of fiction or the literature which is relevant to this, so that we can have more understanding of that relevancy of that as well. I hope the video has been liked and understood. Somewhat it has changed your mind. So if it had been done, do not fail to click on the subscribe button or the like button. Thank you very much for all this, watching for this, and here it will definitely close. Thank you, all of you.